Well, we love sharing vocation stories here on the Busted Halo Show. And our guest this evening shares her unlikely path to becoming a religious sister in a new memoir. Sister Julia Walsh is a Franciscan sister of Perpetual Adoration and part of her congregation's formation team, serving women who are discerning their vocation. She co-founded The Fireplace, an intentional community and house of hospitality on Chicago's South Side that offers spiritual support to seekers, artists, and activists. Sister Julia's work can be found in publications such as America, National Catholic Reporter, the Chicago Sun-Times, and many more. She hosts the Messy Jesus Business blog and podcast, and her new book is called For Love of the Broken Body, a Spiritual Memoir. Welcome to the Busted Halo Show, Sister Julia Walsh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
How are you? Tell us about your congregation if people are less familiar with the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, right? Like most religious communities, we have a acronym. We just say that we're the FSPA sisters. So we're based here in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I am calling from right now. And we actually are celebrating our 175th year of founding now this year.
Congratulations.
Amazing. Yeah. And so we have been doing all sorts of ministries throughout our history and centered in the Eucharist. We have a real Eucharistic charism, and adoration is the centerpiece of our congregation. We have an adoration chapel where there's adoration going on right now and every day.
I would hope. I mean, it's in the name, Perpetual
Exactly.
Adoration.
Exactly.
Now, people, if they were to see you on the street or maybe on our Zoom square that I'm looking at right now, they might say, "Oh, that's an interesting religious habit that she has on there." You got like a hat, like you're out in the sun, like a cabana, Cubano hat.
Yeah,
it's a cool habit.
It's a cool habit.
You know, we all have our own style, and basically wearing hand-me-down clothes.
Oh yeah. Oh, so that's your habit.
From Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah.
But it looks, honestly, I'm jealous. I think it looks awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Sister Julia Walsh is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. She has a new spiritual memoir called For the Love of the Broken Body, a spiritual memoir. The Broken Body. Now, we kind of got to start with your very fascinating, but I'm sure you would use a different word, story about this origin story that brought you eventually to becoming a religious sister. But you, if I can, sort of bury the lead here, cut to the chase, you almost died falling off a cliff. Is that right?
Yeah.
What were you doing? Don't get so close to the edge. What did you do?
Yeah. So what happened is when a month into my novitiate with the Franciscan sisters, I found out my parents sold the farm that I grew up on in Iowa. And I went back to the farm to pray my goodbyes and say goodbye to this land that had really formed me and made me into the young woman that I was. I was just 25 when this happened. And shortly after I got settled, I tried to climb down a cliff and I fell face first into a creek and shattered my face from my eyebrows to my jaw. Now, I was already in the convent. I was already part of the sisters.
Wow.
And I was discerning whether I wanted to profess my vows and adjusting to this lifestyle. So it became this whole framework, for really thinking deeply about what it meant to be a vowed religious.
Can we go back to shattered your face? What exactly is entailed in that and the fixing of that?
Yeah. So my hand went up to my eyebrow or up to my forehead when I fell. And so my knuckle was broken. My wrist was broken. That really became a cushion to my skull. And then from my eyebrows to my chin, I had more facial fractures than the doctors could count.
Wow.
Yeah, I lost teeth immediately. I felt my jaw break in half immediately.
Wow.
My and my nose was fractured, and so then it's a miracle that I survived, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for God's presence and love and how I was able to receive really good health care and reconstructive face and jaw surgery that helped me to get back into shape and serving God's people and ultimately profess my vows. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would imagine, yes, here you are. I would imagine, though, that because here you are, a very happy personality, and talk about vocations, the religious life. I would imagine there was some dark moments. There was moments of challenge and doubt and sort of a dark night of the soul.
Mm. I think what happened is that I actually was forced to confront the deeper reality of my identity, right? Who we are as people, as children of God, is not so much about how we appear. And as I felt deformed, I felt very ugly. I didn't want people to see me when I felt so broken. And I learned through that my depth of personhood was deeper than my skin, right? Is into my heart. And I had to offer that full self to God. And my face didn't make me, even though I used to be like so complimented by my smile and all this is not what made me as as who I am.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think the darkness or the struggles that I dealt with were probably more about the consciousness of how everyone actually has a story of brokenness, and everyone is bearing scars, everyone is wounded. Our woundedness is part of what makes us human, and it's part of what unites us to the resurrected Christ, and empowers us to serve and love God's people and be present to them in their suffering. Yeah. The readers in the book, when they read For Love of the Broken Body, I think they'll discover that the struggles for me were more about the vows than about the brokenness.
Interesting.
And that was a grace. That was a true grace, that I was overwhelmed with gratitude instead of with misery.
Right.
Mhm.
Sister Julia Walsh is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. We are speaking about her new book, For Love of the Broken Body, a Spiritual Memoir. You also host a podcast and a blog, Messy Jesus Business. What sort of messy business do you get into over there on the blog?
Yeah, I've been hosting Messy Jesus Business since 2010, and then in 2020 it became a podcast as well. It is such a joy to explore the messiness of living the gospel and being a disciple of Jesus Christ with all sorts of creative people, with writers and poets and journalists and activists and artists, and, just so many creative folks who offer reflections on what it means to be on the messy margins of society, to be
Oh,
in the spaces where there's struggle and transformation, and we're trying not to offend, and we're trying to love all of our neighbors, right? And to not increase polarization, but ultimately build up unity, and how that's a really complex and messy thing to do. But when we stay centered in Christ and remember our call, our vocation, lean into our purpose instead of even the messiness, we're given the strength we need to persevere in our mission. So yeah, Messy Jesus Business. I encourage everyone to who's listening to check out the podcast. Especially, I've had some really amazing guests. I've interviewed some amazing people, and they have great stories to tell. Maybe you'll have to come on sometime, Father Dave.
that'd be fine. That'd be fine. I don't know if I have a great story to tell, but
Come on.
I think I could come up with some good questions.
Now, Brett knows that many years ago when I was living in Colorado, I got too close to what I would probably more term a steep embankment. You actually had a cliff falling. I have used the term I fell off a cliff, but really it was a tumbling down something very steep that I couldn't stop.
He's been using cliff until he met you. So it's in comparison so that,
Right.
he's looking back. He's like, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. But, I'm glad both of you are okay. Talk about messiness.
this
Talk about
is
messiness, right?
This is a direct quote from one of my homilies.
And I fell off a cliff.
Fell off a cliff. That's right. That's how I've described it.
The abrupt way he says it always makes me laugh. That's what he
You
was
actually
up to that
did.
day.
And thankfully, I was not, nothing was really severely broken. I think I bruised a rib or something, but I was tumbling, and I was alone too. And I was scared. And it really does. It was I experienced it being very much of a spiritual God moment, to the point where, I don't think I really thought I was going to die, but I remember thinking I want to, if something's broken here, because I had to drive myself down the mountain to the hospital. I remember thinking to myself, I just want to get back to serving your people, Lord. So it's interesting to me that this was all part of your discernment to be a religious sister.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too. And especially when I don't believe in a God who actually wants his children to suffer, right?
Right, right.
And and so things happen to us and God shows up and is there with us in the mess, in the brokenness, and is able to redeem and transform and illuminate, right? So there's phenomenal things that can happen when we're conscious of God, even in those most broken places. I remember when I was falling off the cliff, I thought, oh, I could die right now. I had this whole conversation with God, this whole prayer as I
In the
was falling.
slow-mo? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "God, it's a little early, don't you think?" I'm
It's a little, hey,
25. I
I'm
don't wanna
25
go.
years old.
Yeah,
Come on now.
geez. Give me a
Yeah.
shot.
But I love in your the way the sort of arc that you take us in your book For Love of the Broken Body, a spiritual memoir. You talk about being shattered. You talk about being repaired, and a few minutes ago we talked about great reconstructive surgery or whatever, or having the confidence in that. But I love what you move to in part 3. You simply describe it as being held. Why do you use that term?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I came to know God's love as in community and in my own commitment to Christ, who is holding me in my brokenness and transforming me. But yet I really wanted the readers, I'm hoping that the readers will pick up from my memoir, From the Love of the Broken Body, that our lives all have a narrative arc that is much like the Eucharistic liturgy, right? And all of us are blessed, broken, and shared. And in order to be shared, we have to be held. We have to be held out. We have to offer who we are truly,
Ah.
right? So I am held as I'm offering who I am to God and God's people through my yes
Mhm.
to this radical countercultural way of giving my life over to God through the vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience. So there's
Well,
many layers, Father, but
and
that's
I
part.
also like the fact, obviously, you in your book, you talk about your own vocational discernment in the midst of recovering from a near life-ending accident. But also now your work is with vocations to your community and even helping people. I know that most of us who work in vocation work in the Catholic Church, it's not only about recruiting to our team, it's helping people, find where they're called, even if it's called somewhere else. But I like the point you make that discerning a vocation is not always like a before and after. Like, here's when it happened and now it's all clear sailing, smooth sailing.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I Even today I was praying about God help me to keep saying yes to this, right?
Right, right.
Again and again. And in our world and society, there's so much that the common culture is telling us about, like, do what feels good, or like if you're not comfortable anymore, don't stick with it. Commitment is a very countercultural
Yeah.
gospel act.
Yep.
And when we are disciples of Jesus Christ, we are like following him wherever he takes us. And sometimes that means we go on adventures we would never choose for ourselves. But then there's phenomenal love there. Yeah. So trying to stay open to God's will and surrender my own with trust, it's big work. This is lifetime work. I don't think I don't think though that felt like I relaxed about my vocation until I made final vows, which was 6 years after the conclusion of the book. So there's other chapters that could have been included.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe a sequel. I don't know.
I don't think I want to do this again.
Yeah, if you could have the book without a fall or anything like
Right,
that,
yeah,
that would really
yeah.
be optimal. Right.
Maybe you could write about somebody else.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to lift up the saints from now on instead of myself.
Okay.
They already
You
went
know,
through it. Right. There you
Yeah.
go.
I think, it's like this. Some people have asked me why I wrote this book and why, and have marveled at how open I was. And I do feel really exposed and really vulnerable. And I do not want to share all these private secrets about my inner discernment struggles with the world. No way.
Right.
But I believe that there's something about the power of storytelling and witness and how that builds up the church. And we're all called to tell our true
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
right? And Jesus is models that for us and who he is. And so I just really felt like out in alignment with my vow of poverty. I had to get out of my comfort zone. I knew the power of the story and I had to share it. It was and allow the power of the story, just like the power of my vocation, to be offered to the greater good and hopefully serve the church. So obviously I hope people read and reflect on their own stories and how God has been active to them.
And also
yeah.
Also in line with your vow of poverty, all the royalties go to the sisters, the Franciscan
exactly.
Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. and that's hey, just like a husband or a wife who go to work every day, they bring home the money. It's for the family. That's what we do too. You and I.
That's right.
Money's for the family.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's about the money for me at all.
Well, we hope you sell enough books that it starts to become, wait a minute, what's going on over there? Look at all those royalties.
Yeah, there's a whole genre, Father Dave, about of women who have left the convent and then written tell-all books about that. There's very few. I couldn't find any books of memoirs written by my generation. I'm in my 40s, true vocation stories of people that stayed in religious life. So it seemed important to me too that I take that risk with hopes and trust that it'll serve the church somehow.
The book is called For Love of the Broken Body, a Spiritual Memoir by Sister Julia Walsh of the Franciscan Sisters of the Perpetual Adoration. You're in La Crosse, Wisconsin, is that right? La Crosse.
Yeah, right on the Mississippi River.
Is there Benedictine? Who else is in La Crosse? No?
I think it's just us nowadays.
Just you guys. All right.
Yeah.
I think of it as a very Catholic city. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, it's the head of the diocese, the cathedrals here. Yeah, and there's other congregations.
As Brett's pointing out, maybe it's the name.
The cross is basically what it, I can see how your brain could make that connection.
Right. Yes,
I'm at the other end of the Mississippi here in New Orleans. You're where it begins as a trickle. It gets a little bigger down here, but yes.
It's huge here too.
Okay, I figured.
It was a little too big today for Brett. Had some flooding.
Yeah, I think it grew today. In fact, it's growing currently. So I hope that's okay.
Bless you.
I'll try not to fall in. You guys seem to be into that, but
yeah, be careful in those embankments.
Thank you.
Watch it. So please check out Sister Julia's podcast called Messy Jesus Business, also a blog. And we'll put a link on our radio blog, bustedhalo.com/radio, so you can see where you can pick up the book For Love of the Broken Body, a Spiritual Memoir. There's plenty of memoirs out there about people who have left the convent, but here's one about someone who chose to say, and in fact, even a tragedy in life helped discern that call. Sister Julia, thanks for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was such a joy.